Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for a spooky Halloween episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Tom. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Hello, friends.
As you can see, I've gone all out for my costume.
I can tell.
Yeah, this took a lot of thought, a lot of investment. I definitely didn't run upstairs 7 minutes before this show started and remember that I needed to get a costume and ask my wife what she had. And I believe this is actually for one of the dogs, but that's okay.
I also believe that. I was going to text you to remind you at 8 o'clock, and I went, I'm not going to. We're just going to see if he remembers, and it'll be that much more hilarious if I show up on air. Well, I'm like, hey, I thought we were doing costumes, and you're
Yeah,
like, nah, I decided not to.
where you're Doctor Strange and I'm just like Vince.
Yep.
The real
Yep.
question is, Tom, what kind of a costume do we put on every day just to make it through life? That's the deeper questions I'm asking over here. You know,
Indeed.
isn't this all just
Indeed.
a costume, man? All right.
As a
Anyways,
Muppet eats your head.
as a Muppet eats my head, yes. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the best, the scariest units in AOS. Those things that make up the scariest lists. What makes a unit good, and why? I got a piece of feedback, Tom, that said,
Okay.
"Hey, you guys sometimes you've been a little negative lately, and
Who, me?
you
You.
know, well, the show. And so me is the
I,
critique.
I was going to say, because, I don't know, I've been pretty positive, folks.
No, I understand. You have been, and that's the difference between a Nighthaunt player in fourth edition and an Iron Jaws, Skaven, Slanesh player in fourth edition or whatever. Like if
I
I
don't
if
know.
I've been playing an army that's cracked 50% and most of mine aren't above 45, so it's like
Weird.
this has been a
Weird.
different experience for me this edition. But hey, that's fine.
Has
Do
been
not,
fun.
Tom, right now, stop it. Whatever you just hit, you hit your mic a bunch. You're gonna stop that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and do all those things. And don't forget super chats there. Your super chats right now in the month of November and October are going toward the Buy Tom a New Microphone Fund. So, just think about that. Anyways, yes, that's what we're going to discuss tonight. But of course, first, as always, the news.
Let's start with that wonderful, wonderful rumor engine.
Yeah. It's a 40K landmine thing or something.
Yeah, don't be so negative. It's fine. It's
They're allowed
just
to have
fine.
rumor engines. I'm just saying that's what it is.
Yes.
The real rumor engine news from this week, Tom, had nothing to do with this current rumor engine and everything to do with the
Sure.
fact that the oldest unsolved rumor engine, the image of it is actually in the fourth edition Age of Sigmar book, right? In a big piece of art. It's like faded out in the background with the big spider face
Yep.
because clearly it was a second incarnate, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the first incarnate was received so poorly, right, that they just
Yep.
shelved it and were like, nah. Which, I mean, look, full credit to them. They paid probably to have that thing made. Like, I wonder, it has to exist in some form. Like, where were
Like,
they able to stop that?
is it boxed? That's what I want to
Right.
know. Is it just sitting on a pallet somewhere, like womp womp womp?
Is there, like, the saddest palette in the world in GW's warehouse? Yeah, yeah. Right? Um,
Oof.
so, I don't know. But at any rate, I thought that was actually cool. We got Martin Orlando throwing in 5 for the Tom must buy for the microphone fund. Thank you, Martin. You're a hero. And then Branu Mate saying, as the opening donation to the new mic for Tom Fund, I feel compelled to keep the ball rolling. Thank you, Branu. I appreciate both of you very much. Thank you all, everybody who comments and likes and does all that stuff. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I thought that was cool that like it got far enough along that they actually had, the art and used it in the AOS book, probably because
Yep.
that was, getting set and everything before they
Sure.
knew
Sure.
it was canceled. They weren't going
And
to release it.
it's very Ragnarok like,
Yeah,
anyways.
Yeah.
And so, like, it kind of fits because if you'll notice, it's in the Gloom Spite section.
Yep.
Like, that image is in the Gloom. So it's like, oh, look, Spider God, and they can just kind of like hand wave it.
Yep.
So,
Uh, did the incarnate really get received that poorly outside of the active player base? I thought the unwashed masses were cool with it. And I will say this. I mean, obviously, I don't have like hard survey data on it, but it was basically universally hated by everybody I talked to, and so much feedback on the show. You know, I play with a group of like pretty beer and pretzel casual people fairly regularly, and they all despise this thing. I explained it, and they were like, "I hate this. I never want you to play with this. Can we please forget this thing exists?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I mean, I was like, I won't use it, and that made everybody happy. So I mean, you know, that's a small sample size and anecdotal, but I think generally it was pretty hated.
No, I mean it was obvious at events, right? When folks were running up with like the all shark list anchored by uh
An incarnate,
an
yeah.
incarnate, yeah, and everybody's like, nope, hard pass.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a squig. I got a hair squig, Eric. That's what's on my head. There you
and
go.
it's eating his head.
It is. Yes. It's. I think it's supposed to be the Menomina guys out of the Muppets. I think. I'm not sure. Or it's just a funny monster costume for one of the dogs.
I would say I want to see it on the dog.
Yeah. Sure.
That's what I want to see. Yeah,
I'll see if I can't get it on one of the dogs and take a picture. Absolutely, and share it out on
fantastic.
Twitter and Blue Sky where I am now. I need to put that up there too. It's the same thing. It's at Warhammer Weekly on Blue Sky as well. So this thing up here, that's true for Blue Sky as well. You can come follow me over there. Okay. As Twitter slowly descends into a hellscape, it's good to have a second ship cruising up right alongside that you can just jump over to and keep sailing. Anyways, what is next? What are next?
White dwarf armies of renown. Bom bom bom.
Yeah, I've got a picture here of the Duerden Ascendant, Tom. It's Grombrindle,
Grombrindle. Yep.
that guy, the White Dwarf,
Yep.
who we know
Yep.
has sneakily been, you know, hanging out and about in the stories.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Nathan Fee. I appreciate that very much. Absolutely. Win all the Halloween costume contests. And it's unified. So it's this guy and all the unified dwarves, right? The dispossessed and the KO and the Fire Slayers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting-ish. I don't know what I would throw it into, but
Oh, I should state this is all legends.
oh
Like it's all instantly legends.
yes, so it's not real.
I mean,
Like that's the problem. Congratulations, you just printed ipsum lorem text for the majority of the community that actually plays this game.
yeah, I don't know. You know, it's so weird, right? Like, I don't know. I guess, yes, probably. It's weird because it's just such a different thing. As we're both like pretty regular commander players as well in Magic. There we go.
We
First
are.
Magic reference
Yep.
tonight. Boom. Take a drink. And like that's clearly like I couldn't care less about competitive format. We do this thing and we break rules all the time. But yeah, I still like heed the commander banned list or whatever, right?
Sure.
And
No coalition victory in your decks.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no Primeval Titans. But like you know, at the same time, if somebody showed up at the table and wanted to play this, I'd be like, fine. But so much of Warhammer revolves around tournament Warhammer. It is a strange dichotomy, right? Like, but I wouldn't care. This seems like a fun thing to play against. I would totally love to you know, if somebody asked me, could we play this? Yeah, of course.
And it's humorous to me to be clear here. It's humorous to me that we're about to go to an event where this would probably be perfectly acceptable.
100%.
Right? And yet we're just like, it's ipsum lorem text. So what I say all this to say, like, I think GW needs to do a better job of community management and incentive structures. And what I mean by that is this, like, I think there is a real market out there for non-competitive event experiences. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the holy events show that. And you're right. Like if you took this to Steve, the TO of Holy Havoc, which we're going to go to here in a week and a half or whatever, and said, this is what I want to run, Steve would be like, okay, fine. Like that would be the conversation. Approved.
Yes.
You know, it would be that complicated.
And so I think GW just needs to crack the code of like non-competitive events.
Sure.
And it needs to be modeled. Like obviously Realms at War not Realms at War. Who was the ones in the UK that were doing the narrative events?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Realms of War.
Was it Realms at War?
Mm-hmm.
Realms at War and the Holy Events. Like there are a number of like pockets that have done this successfully for a pretty extended period of time. I just wonder. I know the Realms of War. You don't need to note it in the comments. I know it's still going on in the UK, but I just say that like there is an environment out there. There are communities out there. I just wonder if GW could do something to help front those things.
Yeah, well, you just run Legends Allowed tournaments. It's that simple. Okay, because like here's the problem: a narrative event's a really high bar and scary. Okay, now it doesn't have to be, but like Raw, those Raw events were like they were a thing. Like they were DM'd. There was a lot of experience to it. It's like the narrative event at Nova or such. Like it's cool for people who are real into it, but like you got to be into it and like willing to do a lot of extra stuff. Yeah. What you need to make this viable and people interested is just run events and say legend stuff is allowed.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Okay. It's that simple.
Yes. And maybe like
it's still 2,000 point match play games. Don't be scared. It's all right.
It's
you can just use your bone splitters after whenever the date is.
It's a Legends battle pack. It's a Legends battle pack event instead of a GHB 2024 25 battle pack event.
Sure.
It's type 1 instead of type 2.
Okay. Sure.
There's your second magic. There's your second magic reference.
Yeah, sure. It's an eternal format. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
It's fine. So anyways, I mean, my real problem with this would then become this is still a stupid way to deliver this, right?
Of course.
Because it's only going to exist in this white dwarf. It's going to be like, is this going to go to the app? I don't know.
No, of course not. I wish it would. I wish all that stuff would, but no.
Martin Orlando said, it should be noted GW is running a 400-person narrative event next month that allows legends, and we don't care because it's 40K only. We don't care about those people. We're talking about us.
Wait.
But yes.
Well, you know what? Let me just stop.
These are from
I'm going to pause the show. Pause the show right here. GW, great job. Congratulations. That's what, like, that. Yes, that's what we're talking about. It'd be great if that was in AoS as well.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So, at any rate, you know, that is true. It will go eventually to Wahapedia, so that's something. But yes, like, just this will be completely inaccessible in 2 months. What is this? Stop putting White Dwarf is like we've said this for the past 7-8 years, but White Dwarf continues to be a stupid delivery method for perma green content. I would love it that we lived in a world where magazines were still something that was usable, but we don't. Right? Just put it in the app.
Yeah.
Just put it in the app.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, what are next?
That's a great question. Ember Guard Underworlds.
Yeah, that's right. On pre-order this weekend. Boom. Super sweet Skaven minis with that cool, like, you know, little rocket drill cycle. And then also 3 more Stormcast people. That could be like, hey, look, if you're looking for a Storm Coven stand-in, here is another Storm Coven stand-in. Basically, any 3 random Stormcast can be a Storm Coven stand-in. That's all you need. And boom, you have the best unit in the book right there. Find 3 mismatched but vaguely cloak-having sort of Stormcast, and you're like, on it, nailed it. These are my Storm Coven. Yeah, okay. Cool.
Was that published to... is that on the community site?
Is what?
The conversation about the Storm Coven and the Ember Guard.
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm just saying any 3 Stormcast models can be Storm Coven, right? Like that's
of course.
Yes, Maxi, you're correct. There is another Legends army. There's also a Petrifex Elite army for Bone Reapers. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who plays that?
I don't know anybody who actually plays Underworlds. I'm sure it happens. It must. But I mean, it's full of cool models for AoS, so that's fine. I dig that.
Yeah.
This is getting me another. This box is going to get me another cool, different Doomflayer in that little cycle guy. Like I'm
Yep.
using all a new Warlock Engineer with the
Yep.
boss guy there. Like I'm in for this box. I'm gonna make a lot of hay out of it, so it's good. Eventually, I will convert like in some distant point in the future when I'm not crushed under the eternal weight of writing books constantly and making all the content for this channel and working a normal job. I dream of being able to paint that Lord Relictor as Skig and then painting up Ionis as Skig and having my ultimate Skig conversion set complete.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Hey, you shut your face. Okay, how about that? I could have vacation time. It can happen. Okay.
Sure. You're just going to paint more competition pieces, bud.
That could happen too, but we'll see. We'll see. It can be a little bit of all things. At any rate, I think that's all the news, right? And Vince said as he realized he didn't have his notebook for doing timestamps and is now talking to run out the clock.
Yep. Keep it up.
Bulldog Hammer with a $5 super chat. Guys, you're both awesome. Love your channel. Well, thank you, Bulldog Hammer. We really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for all of the awesome comments and super chats and everything. All right. So, Tom.
Yeah.
Let's do some pick of the week, shall we? What would you like to share with everybody?
I got nothing. To be honest, I have been doing nothing but hobby for an entire week.
Nothing but hobby?
Correct. It's been just bleeding out my ears. Like it's so bad. Because I have my son every other week, and so this last week was his last week to finish his army.
Oh, okay.
He won't be back with me before, because I have to travel next week, before we all come home, and the next day we head to Chicago. So the problem is that he suddenly experienced the pre-event army crunch of getting your stuff painted. Sure. And that's all we did this last week. Came home from work, from school, and just painted all day, every day.
Nice.
So his stuff's done.
Hey, there you go. Did your son beat you in getting stuff completed?
Yes.
Awesome.
No, simply because I worked on other stuff that needed to also be done. So our board is done for the most part. His stuff is done for the most part. I bought a carrying case so that I can take my models that I need to finish painting on my trip next week. So hopefully mine will get done as well.
Gotcha. Be careful with your microphone. You got near it there. It was a little thing. Watch your hands.
Weird.
Okay. That's fine. My pick of, we'll talk about that more in hobby. I mean, you're crossing into hobby time, but we'll get there.
Yep.
My pick of the week is for the awesome person, Louise, who also known as Rogue Hobbies, who recently put out a video talking about her favorite artists. And I loved it. Her inspiration, the way she celebrates the hobby, it's fantastic. That's what we need more of. Just everybody lifting other artists up, celebrating each other. It's one of the things that makes this community great, is that ultimately, even though sometimes we go quote unquote compete against each other, that ultimately it's a hobby of shared respect, admiration, and community where we lift each other up. So that's why it's a great thing. I thought the video was awesome. Go check it out. It will be linked below. Louise is awesome. Okay. So, with that, now we can turn to hobby time, which I suspect, Tom, we basically got your hobby time, but what's specifically for the people at home? Tom, what is your hobby time spent? What are you actually painting for this tournament?
So I am doing Cruel Boys. My son is doing Iron Jaws. And we are doing a swampy orky home base is the best way I'll describe it.
Okay.
So a literal hole in the wall.
Nice. Very cool. So for me, I finished up a little Skaven Clan Rat. How did I finally get it? There was a little dog hair stuck in the side of my glasses, where they fold, and it's been driving me insane this whole show. I think I finally got it. At any rate,
nice.
What I've been painting on now is this little guy. You recognize this little guy, Tom? This is the old
I
see
do.
if I can bring him up here.
Yeah.
He's in very
Yeah, the
bright
old
light.
shaman, goblin shaman.
The old goblin shaman. That's right. Now, you might ask yourself, Vince, why are you painting a big goblin, a cool goblin model from like an old Hammer goblin model? And the answer is don't worry about it. But you might know more about it sometime soon. That's what I'll say. Don't think too deeply on it. Why Vince would be painting a goblin, a random goblin. It's
Just
probably
one.
just one. It's probably nothing of consequence. But I don't know, maybe follow me on social media and such and see what happens in the next week. Maybe something will be explained. It's hard to say. Could be anything. Okay. So at any rate, that's what I've been working on, and he's almost done. I'm going to make a little video out of him as well, of course. And he's fun. I really love painting greenskins. Like, it's very fun to paint goblins and orcs. Like, it's just and I did little yellow robes on him this time. I wanted to try something fun and different. And I tried a little different sort of practice and process for yellow that I actually really like. That was both super easy, but yet still very rich. And yeah, there he is. It's a good time. So goblins are fun. When you're looking to unwind and hobby, painting a goblin is not a bad thing to do. It's just generally a relaxing thing. They have such expressive little faces. This guy's head is like 33% of his body mass. He's mostly head.
Yep.
So that's nice. Okay. Well, Tom, with that complete, why don't we turn to the main topic of the night, which is the best
Spooky
units.
monsters.
Yes, indeed. It is. Well, these are the things that haunt my nightmares, certainly. As very few of my army's units occur in here. But that's all right. We are going to talk about the best units in AoS, the scariest units, the things that are the best and why they're the best. And we're going to kind of talk about a little bit of, this will help with your army building, with how you evaluate units, all that kind of thing for how you're thinking about lists. And to get in there, I'm sure it's completely unrelated that the cover image for this presentation that I picked has Archeon and his Varangard on it. I'm sure that's completely incidental and has nothing to do with what will be seen later in this presentation. Okay. Stuart says, Varangard. Good show, everyone. Let's call it a day. All right, yeah. Let's wrap it up. We got there. Okay. So Tom, I wanted to start with a little overview about the fundamentals. Okay. Eric Doty says Night Questor, obviously. Oh boy. Save that thought, Eric. That's for a follow-up show. That won't be as positive. Okay, so I think there are some important fundamentals have changed in the game that we knew was going to alter the calculus, but I don't even know if when we were talking about them, we realized just how much they would alter the calculus. Okay.
Okay.
So, 1. Combat range becoming standardized to just 3 inches. Obviously was a huge buff to the power of infantry blocks and cavalry blocks, right? As well as incidentally, like what the old world would call monstrous infantry, right? So 3 packs that become 6 or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Also did benefit from this, as not all of them had like 2-inch reach or whatever, but now they can exist rather loosely in 6 packs of varying sort of formats and pretty easily still fight.
Yeah.
Completely. Okay. So that's number 1. I think everybody knew that was going to be an important change, but I don't think I think even I underestimated just how important this actually was. Right? Like this is massively different in the efficacy of these units on average, especially on the ability to run. I think what I really didn't clock, Tom, is how much more it would incentivize people to run 10-man cavalry blocks. Like I knew that would shift some, but it suddenly became just automatic. Like if you take cavalry, you just reinforce them, unless they're just light chaff or something. Right? Yeah. Whereas in all previous incarnations of the game with reach and coherency, that was basically impossible. You basically didn't run 10-man.
You very rarely, right?
Yeah, infantry units.
Cavalry.
Yes, absolutely. Rusted Toy says, If Vince dies while wearing that hat, does he turn into 2 smaller Vinces? Yes, I become 2 blue Vinces. Absolutely. And then if those die, they split into Brimstone Vinces because of a random board game that got made 10 years ago. All right. So that's number 1. Now, number 2. There is a lot of anti-infantry tech and items in the game.
Definitely.
Okay, so we know infantry and cav are more powerful, but also at the same time, there's a lot of anti-infantry, and what that usually means, but not always, is it through increased rend, right? A lot of units that are pretty good have anti-infantry. You can, like, now that priority target was fixed, your honor guard ability to be anti-infantry and additional rend is very strong and a very common choice, right? And you can make that before the game. So, like, if you're running a heavy infantry army, your opponent can just pick that thing, right? They didn't have to commit beforehand, right?
Yep.
And basically every army has some degree of Horde Buster available, right?
Yep.
So, you know, like, now that's straight to mortal wounds, not rend, but there's a lot of it. Okay, so infantry and cav more powerful, but there's also this downward pressure on infantry, especially through rend. Okay. Okay. Then we also have the ability to charge and shoot off turn, being like just core functions of the game now, right? And in a way that was more, obviously you had Unleash Hell before, but like shooting off turn now, it's not that you have needed to be charged to do it, right? You can just do it. You have to target the nearest thing. You take a penalty that may or may not be mitigated in various and sundry ways depending on the army, but nonetheless, if you're inclined, you get a second shooting phase, right? Okay. Most monsters are simply bad in their damage and durability, right? So, like, exempting a few monsters with extreme utility or durability, they're just a skip. We just don't take them. And monsters were classically the thing that you would use to counter, like, big infantry blocks, right? Because they would have, like, rampages that were very destructive to infantry and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
Or maybe cavalry, because monsters would often have, like, a rampage that could insta-gib a cav or two, and that's very bad, right? If you lose, like, a 3-wound model to an insta-gib attack, like getting shoved in giant's pants or something, you know, it's a negative, right? Okay. But monsters are basically not Error 404, not found in this game. Okay. Speed and durability, especially when combined with good utility tricks, can make or break a unit. Like, again, because of the nature of the battle plans and how they tend to be arranged and what the battle tactics are wanting you to do, the ability to take a punch, so durability in some way, which could be like high save plus ward. It could be like combat tricks that penalize the enemy when they come in, porcupine style. It could be evasion type stuff where you just don't actually get fought and you can run away from combat. It could be recursion, like heavy recursion where you just come back, right? Whatever. There's lots of different ways that durability can manifest. And then combined with speed, really do make or break a unit. That's always been true to some degree, but I think it's more true now than it's ever been. Okay. And then lastly, coherency matters. The reason I have this written is because of the minor change to coherency, the way it should have been, we've seen the rise of the six-man unit, right? Like when you have six models and you only have to maintain, like, that's opened the door to anything that is bought in 3s, reinforces to 6, especially if it's very intense power, having a lot of viability. Okay, these are all the fundamentals that changed.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything there, Tom, or do you disagree with any of my points?
No, I would say, like, let me just reinforce for those that aren't, like, coherency really does matter, and you need to pay real close attention to how you're setting up units, because you just can't, because it checks now after every loss. It's a big deal.
Yeah, which I would say like 20% of tables actually play with if we're like at a tournament. Right? So I'm sure it's much like 2% of tables writ large. But yes, technically that is the correct way it's played. Is like you remove a model, you check coherency, you kill to coherency, then you repeat, right?
Yeah.
And in most friendly games, what's going to happen is your opponent will just be like, "Hey, just scoot that dude and keep pulling," right? Like that's.
Yeah.
But you know, in a tournament game, technically you're supposed. That's how the rules state you're supposed to resolve it, even though those rules are stupid.
Yep.
And it just shouldn't work like that. That's one of those times where you just need to have a sidebar that says, look, here's what we intend. We'll be very clear. Trying to get rules text to perform acrobatics is how you get yourself in these situations, when what you need is relatively human understandable text, and then next to it in a sidebar you just write, look, everybody, mask off, here's what I'm talking about, okay? Here's the very clear intention. And most of the time you can get at that to where it eliminates all confusion, but they just, they don't do that very often. Sometimes they'll do designer's notes, and I like it when they do. I wish they would like talk about it more. James, I have not watched Stuart the Iron Gutsman's most recent video, but I will absolutely have to check that out. I look forward to seeing it. I like his views on the game. Okay, so given that is our foundation, Tom, that's the groundwork we're going to be building from here. That's then going to create categories of best models. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So let's get into those categories. Here we go. Category number 1. I wanted to go find a picture of this, but I wasn't sure like what it would mean. But yeah, you lived in Texas, right? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Anytime you're in Texas, you see the billboards, right? That's like, hire the hammer. Have you been injured? Call the hammer, right? Like hire the hammer, like that dude. I don't know who he is. He's some lawyer in Texas who I guess handles like trucking accidents or something, probably.
Yep.
So yeah, hire the hammer. So let's talk about melee hammers here, right? What makes a good melee hammer is anything that can move fast, hit hard, especially with mortals or high rend or just weight of dice, right? I will accept any of the above, okay? And survive the clapback, right? Because of any various and sundry tricks they may have. Be that, again, high armor, wards, negatives, blah, 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 blah. Okay?
Yep.
Yes. Mini arcs, the Texas Hammer. Yes, absolutely. Oh, Jim Adler. Is that his name? Okay. There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stuart. Okay. Yes, thank you. I agree, Doc Phantoms. I completely agree. All right. So here, Tom, by the way, my images are not meant to be exhaustive. They're meant to be illustrative. Yes?
Yep.
So
explanatory
of a class of things that other models also belong to. They are just often sort of the most emblematic of that class. Yeah? Or that cohort.
Yep.
Okay. So Varangard. Varangard exemplify almost every perfect storm we talked about on the previous page, right? They hit hard, they move fast, and they can crack shells, and they do high amounts of damage, and they have built-in once a game fight twice, right?
Yep.
And they are tough enough, being a 3-up save, 5 wound model, right? They could potentially have other benefits in the index, right?
Sure.
Through Eye of the Gods and such. But at any rate, they are just innately a very, or their marks, by the way, which I didn't mention that as well. Another thing. And they're tough enough that they can generally survive to get that full second fight in, right? Like, if you put fight, it's so funny. Fight twice is either the most powerful ability or just pretty worthless, right? Depending on who it's put on. Yeah? Like, if you gave 20 Daemonettes the ability to fight twice, I don't like, which you can, technically, just have a Shalaxi around, right? It still matters usually not at all. Because if they attack a unit and leave, 5 models alive, those 5 models will cause cataclysmic damage to the Daemonettes, right?
Yeah.
On the clapback. Because they're 6 up, 6 up. So they're nothing
Yep.
6 up.
Yep.
Whereas the Varangard will often maybe they lose a model. That's usually sort of the modal outcome after they hit something. If they hit something really hard that's able to withstand the first hit, they'll lose like a Varangard and then just kill the thing. All right. So
Yep.
okay. So to me, this is sort of the what I would call just like the perfect hammer. It's just kind of
Okay.
like it's right there. It's right in the space where you want it to be. It's doing everything you want it to be. Right? It's right? I mean, that's it,
Yeah.
it's everything
Yeah. I
want
don't
in
know
a
what
hammer.
else. Yeah. Like they are doing exactly what you would expect. They have high or higher ish mobility.
Yep.
They have survivability. They have damage. They have, um, yeah. There is some mortals on some of that as well, and combined with solid rend or solid damage. Yeah.
Yep. That's right. Or they'll
And
kill a thing, pile in, and then kill another thing. Yes, absolutely.
yep. Yep.
Okay.
And the results of the like that are out there for events testify to this.
Absolutely. All right. So now a couple other ones. So I have Dawn Riders here in this because Dawn Riders are again very powerful. Now for the first part of the edition, they were benefiting from both being able to throw up their neg 1 to be hit and their 5-up
Yeah.
mortals, right? They lost that ability to stack that. But again,
Yep.
they are still fairly tough cavalry, 3 wounds apiece, 30 wounds in the unit, 3-up save, very fast movement at 14-inch base speed, right? With the potential to go even much faster, right? Because they have the what is it called? Speed of Haish, right? Is one of those spells that can be
Yep.
put on them, which puts them up to like 22 inches or something truly wild. And they hit and make a ton of attacks, mortaling on a 5-up. I don't know how else to explain that. They don't have the fight twice or anything, but they have truly explosive mortals. They're quite subject to being flat-foot. It's hard for them to fight their way out of those
Yep.
things sometimes if they get flat-footed.
Yep.
But they're great in almost all other regards. Are you like writing a book? What are you doing?
Don't worry about it.
Okay,
I'm taking notes.
I'm sure. All right. Okay. My next one here is Bladegeist Reapers, BGRs.
Sure.
But really, that could be a couple different Night Haunt units, right? Who have different mixes of like weight of dice and everything like that. Again, Night Haunt are very fast. They have they have run and charge that they can get into. They can fly. They move through obviously like other terrain quite easily and things like that. So they just are very mobile around the board. Even though 8 inches isn't like that hugely high of a base speed, but when you factor in run and charge, they can get there.
Yep.
And they make a ton of attacks. And importantly, with Lady O in the list, which she always is, they can be quite recursive. Right? Even if they lose some of their number, it's actually quite easy to just pop some people back, a decent number of people back in the unit, and you're right on your way. Right?
Yeah.
They are also quite tough because they are super ethereal. Right? 20 of these guys, sure, they're only 20 health. Right? They're 1 wound models, so it's 20 wounds. But that's a lie because it's 20 wounds on an unrendable 4-up and then often a 5-up ward. So it's often a
And then the
4-up, 5-up.
capability to restore some of those models, not egregiously, but there is model regen.
Yes.
In that army.
But the fact that they also can then retreat and charge does give them a lot easier ability to do things like rally, like retreat or something like that. Not that you can rally, retreat. Or sorry, retreat, rally, and then charge back in. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it makes you a lot more sure about it, depending on what you end up doing there. Plus the fact that they can charge in combat also means that it's hard to... That's such a potent ability. Like, the charge in combat is truly, I think, what makes them just a hyper... Many Night Hunt units, them like that. Hyper-efficient hammers, because a hammer... You want it to be hitting the thing you want it to be hitting, and one of the easiest ways to get stopped up is, like I mentioned, getting flat-footed, right? Like if Dawn Riders get flat-footed, they're kind of stuck there. They got to retreat away. They got to take a little bit of damage. It really can screw up their whole game plan. Night Haunt, you tag the unit. Who cares? It just charges away and goes after the thing it wants to fight, right? So or retreats away and goes after the thing wants to fight. It's just like it's so mobile in that regard. My last example here is the bug riders out of Sylvaneth, which I don't like.
Yep.
Sylvaneth now are already putting up much more impressive results. That doesn't
Weird.
surprise me. Bug riders are amazing. They come in with high rend, with high damage, like damage 2, rend 2 or whatever with some of their attacks. They have good self-healing, both through being near the now expanded range trees, as well as the ability to pop models back in and stuff like that. They have a good wound number. They're like 5 wound models each, decent objective control, and they are fast as lightning. Because you'll often see them run with Belthanos, who's going to immediately give them run and charge, which means they're flying across the board like 18 inches and then charging on top of it.
Literal flying. Yep.
Literal flying.
And they're going to be picking their fight. The key here is it's not just they're fast, they pick their fights, right? So they get in the fights that they want to be in. And they don't and they are able to avoid the fights that they don't want to be in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that there's other units, like those are the 4 I mentioned, but other things in these kind of classes. I think Agrodon Lancers can fall into this class, certainly. Potentially Croxagore. The problem with Croxagore is they're on the slower side of this, but the toughness is upped because they're like 6 wound models or whatever.
Well, and Croxagore don't have the mobility.
That's what I'm saying. They're lower on the mobility side, but damage wise, especially if the Skinkerdoo is near, right? Because if they keep Skinky-Doos around, they just hit so hard. They go to like rend 2, damage 3 or whatever crazy thing happens with them. I don't remember all the rules on those Moonstone clubs and stuff exactly, but it's wild. It like Branu, I understand it's that their high rend attack for the Spite Riders is on their companion attacks, which I agree with is a bit of a challenge. But I've seen these guys used over and over again as a hammer. Like I've played a Sylvaneth opponent pretty regularly since the changes, and man, they are nuts. Like they're so hard to hide from. They just shoot across the board and kill things. And like, yes, you can swamp them. They're not the toughest thing in the world, but they're also not the weakest thing in the world either. It's still a lot of wounds in that unit. Yeah, I don't know about Therodons. Probably. I think Therodons. I think as the points differential has moved around, I think that's potential. I think they're kind of in the Kroiger camp, right? Where it's like, they hit so freaking hard, but mobility is a definite challenge. But there's other units. The eels in Idneth, if used correctly, can hit this bar. They can be another one that can get there, and so on, right? The key is it's the combination of good mobility, which means either high speed or the ability to retreat, run, charge, all of those kinds of things, right? Combined within the ability to deliver damage where you want it. So if you have flight or ultra high speed or something like that, right? That's then the combo. And if it's Cav, that's even better. If there's any downside to sort of the Night Haunt and other things like that, oh yeah, Paladors, thank you, are another great example. The old Paladors, not the new Paladors. That's a great example. Jarrett Ducker says he lost 1,200 points of his city's army to a turn 1 3d6 charging Therodon block. Well, that's okay. I should also state that in this edition, chaff is basically non-existent. It's basically impossible. So, these kinds of hammers can really do a lot of work. But yeah, anything else on? I mean, like that's what to me defines a hammer. And so that, as I was saying, the Night Haunt ones, their only downside is they are infantry. Basically, everybody else on this list and things we've talked about, a lot of them end up being cavalry, Agrodon Lancers, potentially even like Black Knights or Blood Knights. I actually like Black Knights better, just point for point, pound for pound for what they're going to achieve, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like Cav is the great winner right now because there's almost nothing hunting them in the meta. Almost nothing, right? There's so little anti-Cav tech, And the only stuff that came out recently that was strong anti-cav, the Warp Volt Scourgers, are so
Yeah.
expensive when compared to like rattling guns or warp fire throwers that it's just a really hard choice to make. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was building lists, scaling lists just today, and it just made me sad to like realize I was putting 100 more points in on something that doesn't, outside of that targeted function for cav, doesn't, doesn't produce, that much of an egregious gap.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're good, don't get me wrong, but
Yep. Yeah. I agree. Like in the end, I'd rather just save the 100 points and or like a couple, mix that around. Have 6 like warp fire throwers and 6 rattling guns and 6 Giselles and call it a day. Right. That's kind of
yeah.
the way I would lean. All right. Cool. That's going to end up being 900 points better spent. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So that's the hammer. What defines a good hammer? And there's just so little. Yes, oh yeah, exactly. I do want to address that. Kewen said why they ignore the anti-rend. Yes, one of the reasons that Nighthaunt stands out as being one of the armies that can do an infantry hammer. That's what I was saying above on that previous slide when I discussed, right, how most of the tech that makes units scary against infantry is enhanced rend. Nighthaunt dodge that whole thing, right? They just ignore that entire section of the game. Now they still have to a degree, watch out for horde busters, right? Because things that do straight mortal damage will punch through. But otherwise, yes, they're immune to a lot of the anti-infantry tech, which makes them very unique amongst all the infantry hammers in the game.
Yeah. Agreed. And it's something that I don't know how they design out of that. Like they'll be able to fix some of that next season, maybe, but a lot of that is just now hard coded into units, right? Like those are warful abilities.
Yeah, how many infantry blocks are actually good hammers right now? Like I said, Therodon's probably on the line. Like I'm not saying there's 0, right? Therodan's probably on the line. Kroiger's probably on the line, right? Like they exist. They're there. They're usually like the 6-man monstrous infantry blocks more than they are the blocks of like 20 or 30 things. Because those tend to be fairly immune to the horde buster spells at the same time.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So if you can combine like a decent enough save. Trolls. There you go. Trolls would be another decent example, although I think they actually better fit into a later category because they're going to show up later in this list. Right.
Yeah.
Probably Chosen. Yeah, Stuart Chosen. Yeah, exactly. So like the challenge is that like there's some, but almost all of them are like the smaller monstrous infantry type stuff. Right. Not all. Most. Like it's any sort of 20-man block is almost always at a disadvantage. It's not impossible. It's just so easy that if they get caught and they're just dead. Custodes, it's definitely not Brutes. I wish it was Brutes. It ain't Brutes. I've played Brutes a lot. It ain't Brutes. They are not the hammer you want to hire. No. Yeah, juiced witch elves. Good question. I've thought about juiced witch elves as a possibility. They are so very fragile, and this edition has no tolerance for things that are fragile. The damage is way too high. If that unit gets touched when it's not on the charge, same with like executioners and all these other things, if they get caught, which they will, because all of the hammers that are hunting them move 14 to 20 inches and are going to get the charge off on your 4 to 6 inch move infantry, and then they will all die and get lifted.
Yep.
Like that's what's going to happen.
Right? And I don't know how they fix that.
Right? The problem is movement has become so critical for a damage delivery system. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so concerning because this is like a fundamental this is a fundamentals issue. And so either you have to roll back the killing power of all of those hammers, or you need to increase or you need to reduce their survivability. Those are your two options.
Right. Right.
or or introduce something that limits their mobility, or or their ability to be hammer, like reliable vectors,
Yeah, to go
right?
wherever they want, whenever they want. Yeah, yeah.
Right,
Yep.
right. And if you don't have those three things, then there's actually nothing, like there's no solution here. There's no way to fix this if you can't address one of those three issues. Or I take that back. Or you just reduce infantry points to such a level that you're getting 2 to 1 on everything or something like that, just
Yeah,
to
I mean,
a
as
ridiculous
as
amount.
Morgonk just said, you could like shut off all reinforcement on cav units. That'd be a very extreme solution. But
Yeah.
like that, that kind of thing would just like instantly crack the meta and turn it on its head, right? Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, what you would end up with is waves, though.
sure.
You would have waves of cav, right? Which that's still like that's not going to solve this. Like, truly, what is worse? Like, yeah, maybe a tenor um of Dawn Riders that you have to keep in perfect formation, or just 2 5s, right? Like, also where neither of them do you need to worry about formation.
Yeah, it should be stated here that the downward pressure on drops effectively to pushing toward 9 units
Yeah.
maximum, 2 drops in this current edition, and the need of like 2 of those units being prospectors and 2 of those units being heroes and so on and so forth, right? Like it effectively means that you're usually ending up with like 2 solid hammers is how most armies are constructed, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Uh yeah, I think that's an interesting fix, Morgonk. I really do. Um, and then yes, as Cyrus points out, GW gave a bunch of light cav and even heavy cav an extra wound this edition, right, making the problem
Yep.
worse. Like the fact that all cav moved to 3 wounds basically also just that vastly increased their durability as well. Okay, so that's the hammer. Hire the hammer. All right, next up, I saw somebody say long strikes. You were jumping ahead. Firepower. Okay, so the hammer is like your melee unit that's going to go out and kill things, right? It needs to go actually wipe a unit out. But even with the changed priority target, ranged power is still important for handling challenges, right? So what we've seen still is that often a lot of the armies that are doing well are still heavily relying on some unit that has a lot of shooting power it can bring to bear in some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, um, uh, hey, glad to hear it, Richard. So I've got the emblematic long strikes up here. Still have a good range, have their ability to drop to where they want to be. Still a highly accurate and devastating unit, right? Even without the mortals at range. Basically, every Stormcast army that's successful has a unit of 6 long strikes, except no substitution, often 12. I don't know if you followed Dan, our good buddy Dan, over in the UK, in his tournament example over, I think it was not this weekend, but last weekend. So, week and a half ago, whatever you want to say. War in the Heartlands. He was taking like a bunch of dragons, crazy town, bunch of dragons, and 12 long strikes, and he went 5-0.
Yeah.
Drop,
I mean,
pop,
that
call it a day.
high mobility hammers coupled with shooting. Yeah, that checks out.
Yep.
Oh, high mobility non-infantry hammers.
Right. So yeah, I mean, long strikes just still pretty good, still always good. Still, their shoulders are tired from carrying Stormcast on their back for so long. Because that's what it is. Then I've got rattling guns over here, but you could pick a couple different Skaven units. You could pick Giselles, you could pick 6 rattling guns. How long will that last? Will they actually make it so you can't reinforce these things? I don't know, man. It could happen. It's possible. But yes, or 6 warp fire throwers, or 6 warp volt scourgers, or whatever. You got the 6 Kurnoth hunter, like that represents like your cheap mass weight of dice in almost all cases, right? Warp fire throwers 2d6 shots, rattling guns 3d6 shots each. You're trying to buff it up and play the, turn it down to 3s and 3s. Rend 1, maybe Rend 2, damage 1. Just like an incredible number of shots, averaging 64 shots out of a unit of those, Tom. It's wild. Okay.
Yep.
Now, given that's at like a 15-inch range or whatever, so it's not the longest range, but it's also not the worst. So that's fine. Kurnoth, the bow hunters are still scary as all because, Tom, I don't know if you know this, but they don't care about guarded hero at all. That doesn't exist to them. So your utility heroes that were supposed to be immune and immortal are just dead instantly when these guys come around. And they are, again,
sounds like you need some
because
line of sight blocking.
Yeah. Because they'll just jump trees, right? It's hard. Well, it's very hard to block line of sight because they'll just jump through woods or something like that, right? And suddenly show up. Arden Throne with the super chat saying 10 brutes or 6 Gorgruntas for an IJ smash list. Well, Gorgruntas don't kill anything. So you take Gorgrunters if you want a big mobile pinning unit, but I would actually break. Yep. I think Gorgrunters are better in 3 and 3, just like try to go run fast and pin things on the corners.
Yep.
I
mean, they are your prospectors. They're like they're not like even as an anvil, they're pretty shitty. My first game, I ran 6 of them, and I was, to say unimpressed was an understatement.
Yeah. 10 brutes will do work if they can get in there. The challenge is, as ever, the 4-inch movement, right? But like, for as much as I made fun of brutes earlier, if you can sort of do the Ard boys in the front, brutes in the back, countercharge in kind of thing, then yeah, they'll smash stuff. Like, they are not playing around. They are a very destructive unit. So if it was me, I would probably take the 10 brutes. That's what I've usually been running, and I broke up my Gorguntas into 3 and 3 Arden. So
right, they're your prospectors. I mean, like I still like you need them generally.
Yeah. And then lastly, Tom, my example here is our good old buddies Severith and or the Foxes and or the Wind Chargers, right? Just like
Fox Force 5.
Yeah. Fox Force 5, exactly. A terror and nightmare since they were originally printed, and rarely has that ever changed. Does IJ have a hammer? No, not as we defined it above.
Oh, no. I mean, even Maw Crushes just aren't cutting it. Like,
no, they hit like pillows. So, but at any rate, the Fox Force 5 is still very strong. Here you have the combination of like ultra mobility and ranged power, right?
Yep.
You know what's the most sad to me about this list, Tom, as I put this together? By the way, again, this is just emblematic of other... What does the fox say? The fox says, pew, 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 pew. You're dead. You're dead now. Pick up your toys. Pick them up. That's what the fox says. It's what he's always said. What's sad to me about this list, Tom, is, Tom, where's the artillery?
Sure. Right.
Shouldn't that be what it's on my list here?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Like, shouldn't a Warp Lightning cannon or the Iron Sword, whatever it's called, the Cities cannon or the Ogre cannon or whatever, like something?
Doom Wheel?
A bolt thrower? I don't know.
Steam tank?
Steam tank? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right? There was a minute where those were real scary. That happened for like 2 months. Right? Like, what's up with artillery?
Well, they don't have range.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, shouldn't they be like the actual ultra long range? Shouldn't that be their benefit?
Here's a hopefully not controversial take. They should all have 36-inch range.
Yeah,
because
I think that's fine.
They're all like movement 4 to 6.
Yeah, or less.
Or less.
My Warp Lightning cannon is move 3.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. Like, to me, what that says is that they should by default have 36-inch range.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that that would actually do anything. Like,
I don't think so.
because as Eric
And
just said,
be
they're
anti
endless spell bait, right? Like manifestations.
and they should be anti-cav, all of them.
A lot of them are anti-infantry, to be fair, but you know.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah, I just
cannonballs will do a hell of a drug against horses. That's all I'm saying.
sure, sure. Like the all these things just all of these things, like what's interesting about them is long strikes can be set up in the heavens and then drop and pop, right?
Yep.
Rattling guns and other associated weapons teams, not just ales, but the weapons teams, can all be effectively invisible, right? Because they can just sit next to clan
Yep.
rats and be immune to other enemy shooting. Kurnoth can teleport through the woods. Severeth can zwippy all over the board, moving like a million bajillion inches, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's almost like the combination of mobility plus shooting, especially in a world where they shortened all the range of the shooting,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really good. And when they took the artillery and applied the same rules and shortened all their ranges, but then kept them at move 3 and 4 and gave them no ability to get around the board, that they weren't very good anymore.
Weird.
Yeah, that's so strange. Huh. Maybe we should like think about fundamental things like that. I don't know. But anyways,
When was the last time artillery was good?
this has to have existed. There was like a minute where the ogre list was real popular. And that was in third sometime, right? The ogre
The
shooty list,
ogre
right
list?
when the yeah, it was right when like the book came out because you could take a bunch of the big cannons and have the tyrant with his like headdress or whatever stand next to them.
That's
Something
not
like
real. That's not
It-
real because
it
like
happened.
that lasted for 2 weeks until it was eroded. Like that
I
didn't
understand.
that was not an actual thing. That was a blip on the radar. That's like saying skull cannons were good for a season. No, they were good for 2 weeks until the errata. Right?
Well,
Like that's
Branu
not
and Latin agree with me.
that's not real. Like, was there a time when the Stormcast thing was good? No.
No, no, I don't think that was ever good. The Stormcast like Ballista or whatever the Celestar Ballista.
Maybe the Warp Lightning? No. Like, I don't know. I like legitimately, I don't know the last time that artillery.
Mortek crawlers. There was a period where Mortek crawlers were really good.
Okay.
I think Mortek crawlers are probably the one exception here that are actually like decent, by the by. Currently, I don't know that they're not as good as any of this. Okay,
Sure.
but
Sure.
they're above average.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
Like
it's
oh
just fascinating to me. Yeah, like as I think through it, like outside of steam tanks, right? And steam tanks did have their moment.
sure.
Um,
And they were never technically artillery. They were always like war machines or whatever. But still,
well, they got
I
moved to
understand what you mean.
baseline, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and they got moved to baseline or battle line. Sorry. So all of that to say, maybe a redesign is in order. Like maybe a back to fundamentals revisitation of
What is the purpose of artillery? What is it doing in this game? Because
right,
especially now that
which
you can shut it down just by engaging it in combat, right? Which was classically the threat in old Warhammer Fantasy. You'd have your artillery in
yeah,
the back, and then like somebody would try to run fast cav around and tag them up, right? This is like or ambushers or whatever.
and they were scary, so you wanted to do that.
Yeah, they made your army move and go
Now,
engage.
yeah, now they're eh.
Right.
Like if somebody laid that across the table for me, I'd be like, that's burning head bait.
Yeah, sure, of course. Of course.
Like that's
Uh
not
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, certainly cannons were scary in Warhammer Fantasy.
You know what would have been great is if they were, I don't know, maybe rewriting all of the war scrolls, they could have revisited this. That would have been great.
Sure. Marcus
Like
Sloss is
if
really coming down defending the Mortek crawler, and like I get it. I faced a multi crawler list. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. He says he used 3 against the troll herd spam and just bopped him. So yeah, I mean it's. I do think, like I said, I do think that the Mortek crawler one is sort of like it crossed the threshold. Not as good as any of this stuff, but good.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Gellerman says they're kind of in a weird spot like aircraft and 40K. GW doesn't know what to do with them. Yeah, I think that's right. I think, and the point that was made, here we go, Eric said, they don't really move, fight, or capture, so they need to really blow the hell out of stuff at long range, which is borderline NPE. I think this is the challenge they're up against, right?
Right.
So, yep. I think that's right. All right, so that's firepower. The question you need to ask is, can my ranged firepower actually be delivered? And like this is the current problem with why we've seen Huracan stuff over Sentinels, right?
Yeah.
Because even though Sentinels can potentially do more damage, again, it depends on the exact situation, than the target. But the issue is Sentinels have much less mobility. Right? Yeah, they just like as a delivery mechanism. No one's afraid of goblin shooters. Right? It's just not.
Yeah, you could put 200 on the table and they'd be like, and?
Right. Like, okay, I'll just go kill all of those, I guess. Like, you can do 200 damage to that kind of a save in this game.
You look at that and go, oh, you're trying to run out the clock. I see.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you'd be much better off putting like 80 squigs on the table than you would that many goblin shooters, like, by far.
Sure. I was just simply saying because you're going to bring them all back by the cave.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'd rather have 4 reinforced squig herds is what I'm saying, which I think is like about the equivalent points.
Oh, I get that. I'm just saying they're planning on rolling 400 dice per shooting phase.
Yeah, just taking forever.
And just taking forever to do 3 wounds, like running down the clock.
Do you want chess clocks? This is how you get chess clocks. Okay, so.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Let's move on from firepower into the anvil works. All right. So I should have called the last one black powder. That would have been fun. Feel the bite of black powder. So anvil works. Anvils need to not only be survivable, recursion can be part of that, but also win attrition wars or be mobile. So either your anvil has to be able to go somewhere and pin someone in a very effective way, or more likely, they need to be defensive enough to where they can survive being hit through various and sundry, potentially multiple means. Again, survivability, durability comes in terms of debuffing, in terms of save, ignoring rends, like causing penalties, wards. Like there's lots of roads to that path. So, but you know, like anvils have a lot of value, and that you want just like an anvil that can't take damage but deals no damage is worthless. It has to actually deal across some kind of threshold to where it can eventually grind down an enemy. Right. And so this is where hex wraiths are, I think, sort of one of the preeminent anvils. 10 hex wraiths is 30 wounds, again, on an unrendable 4-up, 6-up at worst, 4-up, 5-up at best, potentially with causing penalties to hit and or strike last and or other things also being factored in the mix. They can be recurred, again, as in ways, as we mentioned earlier, through the ever-present Lady O, and they're just a very hard unit to remove. Like, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
They're like one of the world's perfect anvils, because they do enough damage, they will attrit down the enemy in time, right? They will win that war.
Yeah.
My other examples here, this is where the trolls show up. Rock cut trolls specifically, I think, are an excellent example of this. They hit very hard, but they are tough enough and regenerate like crazy. So unless you
you put them back on the table with the shrine too.
That's right. So unless you're like seriously lifting trolls and or going and like destroying the goblin hut, which you can do, like that is a thing that you can do, especially if you've got good ranged firepower, you know,
or the ability to teleport. Like if you can pick up and like if they're not camping it, like you can just pick up and teleport next to it and start in combat.
Right, and just beat the living pants out of it. Yeah. Yep. It is interesting because I think, Tom, if artillery was strong, I think the number one thing it would be used to target would be
Is
like
terrain.
faction terrain. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what would
Yeah,
happen. People would just start blowing up enemy faction terrain like right away. Right.
it'd be great.
Sure. Like it actually doesn't like I don't hate that. The verisimilitude of it's not bad. I have a cannon, you have a building. Okay.
Yep.
It's these two things can go together. And so then I've got Ard Boys down here, right? As another good example of this, where they've got their mortal wound punchy and they're like relatively survivable on a 3-up save with a big old pile of wounds in the unit, right? It's like 40 wounds in the unit, so it's clocking in. It's sort of the soft cap.
It can take
of
some
wounds
hits
in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can take hits on 3-up, and it can easily be 3-up, 6-up. Like that's
Sure.
a very real possibility.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Go into weird mob or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
The thing I refuse to do.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for you.
I understand. I didn't get into the Iron Jaws game to start taking squishy spellcasters, so.
But if you're on an army-wide 3-up, may as well be 3-up, 6-up.
No, I understand. And then Chaos Warriors, things like Mark of Nurgle and stuff like that. Like,
Yep.
It's just obvious, and they make enough attacks, they will generally grind something down. 3s, -1/1. It's like they'll get there. Okay. So, WizBiz said, I'd feel better about losing my terrain from a cannon than from arrows. Terrain is historically the best way to avoid arrows. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong on that. No truth detected.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think like arguably there's like a bad tier below this of things that are almost good enough but can't quite get there that like want to be in this tier. So this is Mighty Skull Crushers would be the good example of that, where it's a mobile anvil and like a 2-up save. The problem is it's just so expensive for the wounds you get. It just, the math doesn't math, right? If they were significantly cheaper, like many of these units are.
Well, you'd flood the board with them. Like they are really on a hair's edge.
Sure.
Like
I mean,
on a
in
2-up
Nighthaunt, you're
base
paying like what are hex rates now? 160, something like that.
I think they're 190. Like they're
Sure,
not
okay.
super cheap.
Okay, let's say they're 190. That's fine. I literally don't remember off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure I have the document open here, so let me find it real quick.
That's fine. Go take a look. My point is they have like the same number of wounds, and
180.
180. Okay, fine. I mean, Mighty Skull Crushers are what, 240, 250, something in that range. That's a big difference for the same number of wounds on like what is usually actually the same save.
250 for 3 bodies.
Yeah, that's insane. Because very often it just ends up being the same save. Like, yes, they're on a 2-up base, but they often fight Ren 2. Ren 2 is pretty common for enemy hammers, meaning that puts them on a 4-up, meaning they actually have the same save as the Nighthaunt, but they lack a ward, and yet they are 70 points more expensive. Right? And they don't hit any harder. In fact, I think they probably do less damage on average.
Yep.
So like that's just the math I can't figure out in my head. Where they how they're pointing these units, right?
Yeah.
If Skull Crushers were 180, they'd probably be taken and could probably be discussed here. Right? Even though they still would be at a disadvantage versus X rates for all the reasons we've talked about, and the lack of fly and the lack of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, but to me, the key with the anvil isn't always mobility. This is one of those places where you actually can get away with being slower. A lot of these good anvil works units can be slower, right? Mm-hmm. But they do have to be able to win the attrition war. Like, they have to be able to do some damage. That's why when I see stuff like, what is it, the Iron Breakers or whatever, the dwarfs in cities.
The hammers? Are you thinking
No, not hammers. Hammers are the ones that actually do like
so
damage,
Iron
but they're just too slow. Yeah, Iron Breakers, because they're like what, 3-up base. They can have a pretty decent ward as well, right?
Yeah.
The problem with those guys is they do effectively 0 damage.
Sure. They're like 3s and 4s, no rend.
Yeah, 3s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. Right.
Yep.
That's nothing. Right. That is just, that rounds to 0 damage. So if an anvil is literally just tough and can take a punch, that's not enough. It's just not enough. So especially in an army like that with no recursion, right? If you could just gum them for the whole time, and flood, that's also a 20 wound cap unit, as opposed to some other Garbo unit like goblins or something that caps at 40 wounds, or clan rats that caps at 40 wounds or whatever.
Or Ardboys.
Sure.
That caps at 4 with the same defenses and better offense.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Like just all the way down. It's just better.
Yep. Agreed. Agree completely.
Yeah. Okay. That are also on 4s and 3s, but they have neg-1 rend.
They do have neg-1 rend.
And they do mortals on being charged. So for doing their job, they do mortals.
Yeah. And theoretically, Ardboys could get additional bonuses if it was like a WA turn and they actually charged. Now, they're not often going to be doing that, but I'm just saying, like, it is.
Sure.
It's possible. They also have a bunch of ways to get bonus attacks in the army.
Yep. Or do mortal wounds from dude.
Zalgrak. Yeah, Zalgrak can give him mortal wounds, which is good. Giving that unit crit mortals is, in fact, hold on, let me check the math here. It's good.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I looked it up,
40...
and it turns out making 41 attacks on crit mortals is good. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, Zalgrak is actually one of the few heroes in Ironjawz I truly do love and think is like awesome. I love Zalgrak. I use that guy basically on every list I build.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that 40 Ardboys is the way to go. Like in most Ironjawz lists that I start with 40 Ardboys.
Yeah, because they can grind. They're good in the grind. And that's what makes a good anvil. Good in the grind. Can take the hit, survive it, and then walk away. They're going to be the thing that walks away.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now let's talk about a slightly different shade of anvil, Tom. Because there's a little bit different take on this one as well. Okay. So, porcupines. Let's talk about porcupines. Porcupines are a very particular kind of anvil that becomes very dangerous to charge without risking major losses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because sometimes they have combat tricks or just rules or whatever that says, if you hurt me, it's either very hard to hurt me because I will cause penalties to you, or if you hurt me, I will automatically hurt you in some way. Right?
Yep.
Yes, Assistant Ref said the thing that walks away very, very slowly. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So here my examples are the Squig Herd kicking out, which are just like exceedingly damaging units on their own that also can recur, as we mentioned, through the Squig Herd herders.
Yep.
Prodders can make them come back really effectively, but they also do mortals on the way out, right?
Right.
And
so they do all the things.
Yeah, it really matters to elite armies. Like this wasn't when I played my Slaanesh army and fought this heavy Squig Herd army. I couldn't. There was no world where I win. I was too light on wounds, right? My stuff just being like weak, low wound Slaanesh. I just died. Like I would fight them, kill some of them, die, and then they wouldn't even need to attack. Right. If they did, they certainly killed me on the clapback. So, yeah, always strikes first, always strikes last being another key part of this. Absolutely, Eric. Yeah, 100%. Gut Rippers, another good example. Just a giant bag of combat tricks that can screw people up. Now, again, it's all on a dice. Could happen, could not happen. Right? Yep. But how much are you willing to bet your best hammer that they're going to roll poorly?
Yeah.
Right?
It's a gamble.
Right.
Every time you go into them, you're rolling a dice. And you're like, here we go. Am I minus one hit and always strikes last?
And lost all my charge benefits.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, that's what can happen. Will it happen every time? No. And that's when the Cruel Boys player will lose. When it doesn't happen, because then their Gut Rippers will get destroyed. Right. But when some or all of that does happen, you will fail to kill the Gut Rippers, and then they will turn around and slap you dead.
That's why that army is hovering at what, 40%,
I don't know what
right?
it's at right now. I
Because
couldn't tell you.
it's around 40%, because in general you're gonna be successful 3 out of 5 times, right? Which is good, but then just that's on good players, and then on average players, right, they're gonna drag that average down.
Sure. It's a very skill testing army. I certainly agree with
It
that.
is.
Yeah. Jose Eduardo, does Skaven have something you would consider a porcupine? No. It's actually a big problem in the army.
Yep. It'd be great
They
if
need
Storm
one.
Vermin were that.
Yeah, they clearly wanted Storm Vermin to be that, but they're not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, do you think, as an aside, do you think the solution to Storm Vermin is that we give them their own ward save?
That would be one of 5 changes you could make that would make it viable. Yes.
Yeah.
There's so many different things you could do.
It breaks my heart that so many beautiful brand new models are never going to get played.
Yeah, sure. They're like way down on my painting list, like way down.
I believe that. I have like over 40 sitting on the shelf, and I was like, man, I would love. Vince and I were brainstorming Holy Wars lists, and I was talking about doing Skaven, and there's nothing I wanted more to do all like Verminous,
sure.
or like all the bodies and do all the Storm Vermin, and I was like, why would I do that to myself?
No, I mean, I'm just painting more clan rats.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. Yeah, like pound for pound, the clan rats are doing everything that the Storm Vermin could consider doing.
Yeah, but way better.
And they do it better. Yeah.
Yep.
Because math.
That's right. My other example here, which might be a bit controversial, Tom, is bloodletters. Okay.
Talk about that.
So let me talk about why I think this is the case. Bloodletters are a really interesting case to me. They are a unit that can exist in the 40 wound, so they can touch the soft cap, right, as their 2 wound models. Yep. They do have ways to get at a 5-up ward. You're not often going to have that configuration, but it is possible.
Yep.
But they're actually really good in this sort of thing because it's actually surprisingly hard to do a ton of damage to this unit, exempting like the hardest hammers. And they don't need to do, they hit so hard back. And when they're fighting, they just keep regenerating. Like they have clan rat regeneration. And it really matters. Like getting back a D3 clan rats is far less impactful than getting back a D3 bloodletters every combat. Right?
Yep.
So the reason bloodletters are a porcupine is not as much because they have like the combat tricks or something like that, like the other people. But what it is that you don't need many bloodletters left. Like if you charge into a unit of 20 bloodletters and kill half the unit, which is pretty good, that other half is still going to absolutely mess you up, right? Like they're just so dangerous. That's ultimately why I think they're a good porcupine. They have a wound density that allows to sort of and ward that just kind of lets them take the hit. They also have tricksy other things going on. Like, yes, they could murder less and stop things and stuff like that in interesting ways. And those tricks are all kind of factored into my thinking. But they're just very dangerous, right? They're just kind of like raw muscle when they hit you back, as Miniarch said, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. Joseph Zerlich said, all the bodies are the way to go with Holy Wars tables or recursion, which clan rats are better at. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
we're not doing that.
Right. Yeah, we're not doing that. But yes, like that would be good. I mean, we'll both have clan rats because you always have clan rats of some kind in your armies.
Right. But no.
And then lastly,
my goal is to paint as few models as possible. Like I'm coming over to the Vince side of holy event thing. Like how few models can I take?
The year I took like 2 giants was a very fun. 2 giants and my warlord was a very fun year. At any rate, Blood Sisters, right? Who have always strikes last on the way in. Like they can crystal stare you and stuff and make you go last and then chop you up with crit mortals. So another classic porcupine. Now it might be that there are certain things that are better at fighting them than others, that they can't make fight last and yada yada, but nonetheless. So it is still a roll. Like Cruel Boys, it can fail, but it's it's still good. Always, you don't want to charge into them and then go last and have a unit of 10 of them swinging into you with 30 attacks on crit mortals, with rend and all that stuff. That's no es bueno right there for sure. So yeah, porcupines. I think there are other units in the game that fit this certainly, although I think this is probably the smallest cohort, because this is sort of new. This always existed a little to some degree, like zombies in the previous edition acted like this, right?
Yep.
But I think in this edition, they actually, for the first time, thought about this as a dedicated role and tried to develop units to fill this role. And look, the reality is they just kind of missed the mark with some of them.
Mm.
Like, I think they wanted shield annihilators to be this. They clearly wanted storm vermin to be this, you know. But many of them just aren't up to snuff. They can't actually take a hit. They can't actually survive the hit or whatever. They can't actually do the damage they need back. They don't have the right tricks or mix of abilities or whatever, right? Okay. And so it's a relatively new role. But I do think we'll see more of this as time goes on. Sure. I think this porcupine thing. By the way, I think good porcupines. So let me return to an earlier question you asked, Tom, which is how do we get ourselves out of the cavalry world? Good porcupines are a way you could get out of this. Like if they design good anti-cav porcupines in future books, right? Then that actually is a pretty hard counter to those kinds of cav units, right? So think about like what the Cruel Boys have in shutting off charge abilities, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of or like shutting off charge abilities, shutting off weapon special abilities, things like that. Right.
Or giving penalties to number of attacks, so it hits every profile, right? So that suddenly against cav it's doubly effective.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That's right. Yep. I think this is a very cool role, but I think that it's going to take Vindicators are too weak for it. Yes, thank you, Eric. Yep. That's another good example of like a failed porcupine. Yeah.
Yep.
But I do think over time they'll kind of hone in this design and figure it out. And I do think that this is potentially an answer for your overall game balance that you were talking about earlier. Okay. Or Vindictors, not Vindicators. Vindictors, which I assume Eric removed his comment. And he's probably going to update it to Vindictors. Because we both said the wrong thing and I didn't even think about it. Because Stormcast names are interminable. All right.
Yep. Not only do they look the same, they all sound the same.
Exactly. So yeah, I hope to see more. I hope to see this space explored more, because I think it is fertile ground for good units that are actually healthy for the game. Because these porcupines skill test you as the other player.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They are naturally a unit that forces you to think about how you're interacting with the enemy, where you can't just like, big piece kill. Right? It shuts that off.
Yep.
So at any time you're shutting that off, that's a good thing for the overall health of the game. So, okay. Cool. Next up, Tom, you know him, you love him. It's Prospectors. That's right, we're here. It's time to go out and get some gold. Prospectors are there to go get your gold. It's out in them hills. Well, quite literally, because you're probably taking them hills and claiming it for a battle tactic for take their land. What defines a prospector? They're fast, they get battle tactics, they act as emergency chaff, and hopefully they're cheap. So yeah, I've got a couple examples here, Tom, who act in different ways. Night Runners. Some of my favorite prospectors. I do love Night Runners. I think it's one of the legitimately best units in the Skaven book. Right? It's a shame that it's still the ugliest unit in the Skaven book. I love the little monkey rats, but good night. Terrible. At any rate, Night Runners. Pre-game move being their big trick, right? But they're also quite fast on their own. They're also invisible. They can, if they're near terrain, so they can't be targeted and shot and stuff like that. So just a very good unit for taking flanks, taking their territory, all that kind of stuff. Prosecutors. Fast, immune to, well, not immune, I shouldn't say that. Yeah. Coin flip immune, there we go, to covering fire, right? And can drop down out of the heavens, so like you could drop and take their land, then move over, and the next turn have a flank or a center or something like that. Like they give you options. All the while they're then blocking up covering fire and causing problems for the enemy, so yeah, good. What was the absolute undisputed king, best prospector in the game, except no substitutions. Only recently potentially dethroned from that, and I'm not even sure that's true. The Dreadblade Harrows.
Still
Uh,
pretty good.
Still pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, they're just constant teleportation, stuff like that makes them exceedingly good at doing like a take their land and then riding over into a flank take or something like that or whatever.
Yeah.
Canary, again, cheap, fast flying, reserve, drop, do the things. And then arguably, I think the now current title holder of best prospector in the game, I think they've unseated the Dreadblade Harrows only by virtue of what they accomplish versus how much you pay for them. And that is
Sure.
the Hunters of Huanchi,
Sure.
who are the Hunters of Hunchi, who are like, what, 80 points? Something
Yeah.
stupid.
Gotta love those chameleons. Sneaky, sneaky.
I think you underestimate the sneaky. 80 points, huh? Or whatever, 90 points. Maybe I'm misstating. I don't know. They're too cheap. That's whatever it is. It's a number that doesn't even exist in many armies. Sub 100-point units. There are armies that don't have like sub 120-point units.
80. They are 80 points.
That's not right. That's not right.
For five of them, or
For-
90 points for 5 of them, depending on if you're using the dart pipes or bolas.
Yeah, you're using the 80-point wins. The actual cost here of like points you pay versus points they earn, there has never been a bigger discrepancy, right? Can they actually earn their real points cost in points during the game? We're getting closer. We're getting closer. They're not there, obviously. Game's top at 50. Not too much hyperbole. But they could be at like a 4-to-1 ratio. That's fully possible.
It's wild.
Okay. So, yeah, Hunters of Huanchi. Like, yeah, great. Okay, cool. Yeah,
cheap.
there's plenty of prospectors. Like, I will say most armies in the game have something you can use as prospectors. And in general, my rule of thumb is you want to hope you can spend like less than 250 or 300 points on prospectors, depending on how versatile they are. Right? But somewhere in that range is where you want to be.
It'd be great if either either Iron Jaws or Cruel Boys had prospectors. That would be neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the 3 pigs are a pretty poor substitution, but yeah, sure. They're like Giants obviously don't have prospectors. I think Giants have been doing terribly in the stats recently. I believe like when I glanced at Warhammer's most recent stats, I think they might be the losingest army in the game now. But they're getting down there pretty far. Because again, like they just don't play battle tactics. They're bad. They have no prospector options. It's they play in one phase of the game and they do that at an average quality at best. It's not like they're actually the highest damage army in the game. They're not even the top 5 most damaging armies in the game. That's what's so wild, right? But yeah, most armies do have some kind of prospectors. In like Slaanesh, I always used Hellstriders or Seekers as this. Seekers are actually perfect prospectors. Seekers are like, what, 130, 120? Can't remember off the top of my head. Somewhere in that range, Tom, for, standard 5 model, 3 wound cav
it's a
unit.
great deal.
It is a great deal. But what's awesome about them is that when you run with Seekers, if you roll less than a 4, it counts as a 4. Okay?
Yep.
What's relevant about that is if you want to do a take the flanks, you can set the unit way back, right? So they can be 15.9 inches from the midline. Yeah.
Yep.
And you can guarantee they will still cross the midline to score you that battle tactic, which means they're like at no risk, right? No one can get at them early game if like the turn
no one has
doesn't
the
work
reach
how you think it was
anymore.
or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no one has the reach anymore.
Yeah, like Seekers are actually one of my favorite units in Slaanesh. I was actually always happy with them. They're one of the things that always delivered for me. So, which is cool. I always like Seekers. I think cool. Damonet's riding licky tongue
Yep.
Anteater cows are cool. SOB, the artillery of factions. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. Um, but yeah, so like I said, most armies do tend to have this kind of stuff, so that's fine. It's really a question of like who's getting away with murder, who has the sort of best ones, right? The ones that are bringing the most other utility. Like, can you be out on the flanks, grab their land, grab table quarters, whatever you're aiming to do, and then also teleport it and act as late game chaff for threatened objectives or stuff like that, right? The more weirdly mobile you are in surprising ways, the more you end up that how deep does the value into the in a turn number does the value of your prospectors run, and how much did you pay for those points, right? Because that's where pigs also lose out. Not only are they quite expensive, but they're like their deep game viability or use is limited, right? Whereas Dreadblade Harrows remain an ever-present threat for the entire game, because if you step off an objective, you lose it.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. Like, they force the enemy army to use their valuable units to camp the objective every second of every game. And if they have nothing else and you left your faction train undefended, they'll just teleport over to your faction train and start beating it up for hitting why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Like, sure. I've seen that happen so many times where I'll just like, boop, your faction train's open now. Pop them over there. Just whack the thing. Like, let's see if you can beat it down over time. It's fine. You can always teleport them away. Okay. So that's prospectors. Are they mobile? Are they cheap? And what is how deep into the game can they continue to function is the question you should be asking yourself. Like, can they float in and threaten objectives late game? Can they float in and act as chaff to guard your hammers from a flank charge late game? That kind of stuff. Okay. Latin says that's why the OC5 of the Spider Shaman was great. That little dude stole so much. Yeah. Rip. Okay. Tom, my next category is called Making Magic. Tom, we've talked about a lot of units. We got to make some magic here, buddy. Okay, we got to make the magical memories. Book your Disney adventure today. Okay. So, magic units are essential, especially in a world of manifestations, and they split largely into two categories. I will talk about those now. Ultra casters who can dominate, and utility casters who are there to do the grunt work. That is the two categories, right? Or like utility casters who are there to like bring something else to the table, and we just and also they're a wizard. Okay, so your preeminent spell doms, I've got Kairos here as an example because he also brings like incredible utility through his battle tactic manipulation and stuff like that, and his cast bonuses for the rest of the army and so on and so forth. He's just like, this guy's an all-timer, and one of the few 400-point monster heroes that's just like just you look at him and you're like, this scroll is completely worth it. No hesitation. 100% inclusion rate, right? But also, like, Techless would fall into this category, although he's quite expensive. But that kind of stuff. Arguably, I put Pontifex and Estra kind of in this category because she has the double prayer, double priester, a fairly rarefied ability. There's only, like, 3 or 4 double priests in the game. I think there's 4 now. So that kind of, like, anytime you can double pray, it's just very, very potent, right? And she does it without being too expensive. That's the other interesting benefit to her, right? Unlike Vizik, Scour in Skaven, who is a super double priest. The problem is Vizik is 450 points and fragile as all get out, right? Like Longstrike see Vizik in there. You can see the saliva start just running out of the front of their masks. They're so thirsty for it. Okay. But, double priests are generally for buffing your own units. Double casters are generally good for getting out manifestations. Right? That's generally what's happening here. Lady O is a great example because, she's like a 2-cast wizard, but that's okay. Like, that's cool. That's fine. But you're taking her also for the utility she brings. She can do good mortal at range or, mortal damage, but she ultimately has a way to just like restore a huge portion of your army to the battlefield. Like she can restore pretty reasonably, what, I don't know, 25 to 30 wounds onto the table, maybe more on average, depending on what your unit mix is. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, probably.
So like using her ability is probably worth about 25 to 30 wounds depending on army construction. That's a pretty good ability. I don't know many abilities in the game that like one use of the ability gives your army 30 wounds.
Yeah, maybe. Like all the units would have to be wounded, right?
Sure. It's again like I'm assuming she can hit some number of units. Again, it's certainly there. Like if all the units aren't wounded and you're not getting much out of her, cool, you're winning anyways, right? Like what's the situation here?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I gutted them so bad they didn't even hurt me. Like,
indeed.
Yeah, boy, rough
Indeed.
day, I guess. Like she's
Yep.
actually strongest when you need her the most. Is my point.
Yes. No, that's true. That's true.
So that's cool. And then lastly, these two new inclusions that kind of just came into existence, which is the Plague Pack and the Storm Coven. You're just like 10 wound or whatever, 9 wound non-hero wizard or priests that can also be recalled through both of the army's primary rules.
Yep.
What?
Sounds like an awesome new rule set. That's all I'm saying.
What is this? Oh, and by the way, they're also cheaper than most of the actual heroes who take a drop in or worse.
Insanity.
At any rate, yeah, these guys are obviously tip top. We don't know if we'll continue to see that. Who knows?
Yeah.
Will other
It'll be
Underworld
interesting.
warbands like that convert over? I don't know. I legitimately don't know. But boy, is it nice when you're an army who has access to this. I'll say.
I'm here for it.
Sure. But the goal of the magic user is, can you either A, super effectively power out manifestations? Like I didn't put them on this slide, but like the Grey Seer is a simple utility caster that's almost perfect.
Yeah.
Right. 120
like 120
points. So like you either want a spell dom who can dominate and it's worth the 400 points, or you want him to be as close to 100 points as possible and can reliably get magic out, right? Or be a cast.
Yep.
Those are the two areas. You do not want anybody in the middle, generally.
I will say, as much as I've been shitting on orcs this evening, I love both of their magic options.
Okay.
Both the Swap Caller Shaman and the Weird Knob. Both of them are at that like 120 mark, like 120,
They're relatively
130.
cheap. Yeah.
And either they're a double caster or they can become double casters very easily.
Sure.
Or they can get bonuses, right? Like based on their stuff. And so, like, man, that's like the Swamp Collar is 120 with an item. He goes to a double wizard on a +1 to cast.
Yeah, no, I like the Swamp Collar
Like,
Shaman. I actually think, again, he's great. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I like that dude has got utility. He's good. He's good.
Yeah, and a Mystic Shield on him already, like a passive Mystic Shield that he's handing out as well.
Yeah.
So like, so they exist out there of these like super high value, low cost wizards.
Yep. The Grey Seer, obviously, because he's casting on 3d6, which is just like an incredibly stupid bonus, right? So he's just like, I've started taking the Incarnate now in my Skaven lists. That's as the manifestation.
He's great, isn't he? He's great.
It's really useful in Skaven where you don't have any anvils, and I just need something I can repeatedly recur that I don't care if it gets punched in the face. And he summons it basically automatically.
Yep.
Right.
I like this is why it was my go-to in Cruel Boys. It's because I'm on a +1 cast, which is better than nothing, and I always have an extra cast to throw away on him, and it gives me an anvil. Like I don't have an anvil in that army, and so it gives me something that can continually threaten and continually take hits.
Yep, makes complete sense. So yeah, I think that the question you need to ask yourself is, can I be cheap but have some kind of bonus or some kind of reliable cast? By the way, even if you're just a cheap wizard that's a cast, that's often not bad. Like sometimes just having, as long as you're cheap, just throwing 2d6 to cast to get a manifestation out in this current game or banish a manifestation is good.
It's worth it. Yep.
Yeah, it's worth it. Or yeah, you look for like the super casters, super priests who can actually get there. You know, those like 300, 400 point people who actually can double pray, double cast, bring a lot of utility, so on and so forth, right? But if you're like a 220 point single caster, like with no other utility, like get out of here. And those things exist. They're all garbage.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Poor
Okay.
arch warlock.
Yeah, I mean, I still end up like the fact that he's wizard 1 is
Yeah.
almost irrelevant to his being taken. He's not a 150
Sure.
point unit. It's wild that he's 150 points.
He's 170.
Or yeah,
The arch warlock is 170.
Yes,
Yeah.
I thought he came down slightly,
Yeah.
but okay, maybe that's after
No, I just built him today. Trust me,
Okay.
he is 170.
He's so overcosted for his points. Like I appreciate
Yes.
he has a bubble of covering fire doesn't cost a command point, right? Which is cool.
Yes.
I still take him,
Yes.
so clearly I must think 170 is okay. But boy, is that overcosted. Like Skaven in general are overcosted. But yeah, like you're not taking him for the wizard. You're taking him to be a static bubble of I get to shoot off turn without spending a CP.
Without penalty. Yeah.
Well,
Or yeah.
Yeah. I wish he was still without. I don't know. You know what? It should just be both. Should just be both.
Sure. Why not both?
I keep it 170. Give him both bonuses. There you go. We'll call it a day. Then it's fair. All right. Lastly, this category of raw utility, which is funny because the Arch Warlock shows up here, Tom, on the raw utility. There are some things that have like just sort of versatility in what they do, and so they're worth talking about. This is harder.
They're enablers.
Yeah, like grab bag of stuff, right? That just have like interesting tricks that break the rules in interesting ways. So I did include the Arch Warlock here because of just like you want to be covering fire in a Skaven army every turn. It will get very expensive on your command points. Having him around basically means you covering fire for free. If you're also like have some warp fire throwers that are in range, which are really great, for covering fire, because they just go to 3s and 4s since they start on 2s to hit. It's amazing. Yeah, it's wonderful, right? So
burn it all down.
I've also got Callus and Toll, who somehow have still not been adjusted points wise and are just like an extremely versatile unit for a bunch of reasons, killing manifestations and being great, like really, really, really hard to remove, somehow shockingly hard to remove. Deck chair sitters, like you have to bring like your complete and total real hammer to remove this dumb ancillary unit, right?
Dude, it's main character energy.
It is very much like, they've got that plot armor real hard. The Idledeath turtle that I purposely made very small because it made me laugh when I shrunk him way down. He looks like a little, he looks so funny. He's tiny. But yeah, the turtle and what it can bring. I know our mutual friend Dino Konstantinos. He's a huge fan of the turtle. His IDK army uses it to to a lot of different tricks. Like it brings utility. He uses it to like go threaten things when he needs to, and so on. And I know he talks about just how versatile it is in his army and what it brings to the overall utility of the force. And then like River Blades is a good example because of their even after the change, they still have their little bounce around trick and stuff like that. They're still quite useful. Less than what they were pre-change, but still.
I'll take them.
Still quite a potent unit.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, Gellerman. It doesn't make any sense. They are like, I don't know what to say about Callus and Toll. So, Eric said, Kronspine, the endless spell for people that don't like endless spells. You're absolutely right. I think that is 100% true. I'm actually going to make myself a special Skaven Kronspine. Because I love converting things that I then throw in the trash and are useless half an edition later. So why stop now? But yes, I'm going to make myself a special Skaven Kronspine. What other like raw utility units would you place here, Tom? This is kind of the hardest one to identify. But like,
so here's a weird one.
Okay.
Gordrak.
Yeah, sure. For the +1 to hit. The only basic source of +1 to hit in the Iron Jaw is a thing they really need. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing it when he calls the wall, right? Once per game. And so actually it's when the wall is called once per game. It doesn't have to be him. But anybody within 18 inches of him is going to get +1 to hit. which that's huge in an army that universally hits on 4-ups,
Yep.
right? Like this is a
That's
way
good
to
call.
get by that. Again, because my world has been in orcs recently, I would not the named guy Scumdrek, but the
Yeah,
big
generic
beast.
Derek.
Yeah, generic Derek, because of his +1 to his mortaling on 5s instead of just 6s.
Yeah,
For
he's
your
also a great
people.
recipient of the 3-up retreat out of combat ability, so you can kind of be aggressive
Yep.
and still just often walk away and be, just kind of gumming up the works. Yeah, I like that.
Yep.
That's a good call.
Yep. Again, it's a utility piece. It doesn't, like it by itself doesn't.
Ooh, Eric said he's using a Frost Phoenix for his COS. I assume you mean Kronspine
Oh, that'd be
proxy. I
awesome.
like that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
that'd
a
be
good
great.
one.
Yeah, I'm using my Rogue Idol
Oh, nice.
as my
That's fun.
Kronspine.
Yeah,
For
that's
my
fun.
orcs.
That's a good use of that. I like that. Yeah, that's
Right?
the
Right?
Orky Kronspine. No, that's good. That's very good. I like that. Yeah.
A big pile of rocks, and you can knock it down, and it's still a big pile of rocks that stands back up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Trying to think of other units of stuff that I've been building recently. The
Oh, arguably, by the way, what's his name? Torgilius, in Soul
yeah.
Gravelord's a good example of this because
Soul, yep, Soul,
he
right,
can double
yep.
dip on your model restore ability or call back the dead people. Right.
The little mini, like this is more of a porcupine hero, but the little mini like hero assassin and night haunt. Like he has a really high utility. He's the
Oh,
one
the
that can like
Executioner?
penalize.
Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yes.
Oh God,
Yes,
he
yeah,
fits in
yeah.
this category. That dude's insane. He has one of the best combat abilities in the entire game. Are you kidding me? That dude is
Right,
and he's a bonus
but he's more of a
hero.
porcupine. But he's more of a porcupine, right? Like he's trying
Sure.
to make you not want to charge. Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's his purpose, is to stand there and be like, "Are you sure you want to come in? Because I'm going to come in with this executioner as a counter punch, and it's going to be painful."
100%. No, I agree. He's a great example of this.
He's a utility. He's also, again, he's porcupine-ish
Yeah,
as
yeah.
part of that utility.
I wish he's actually crafted how I wish most foot heroes were crafted. Right? Like take that template and repeat. That's great.
Yeah, I wish I could think of other ones. Like there are a number of obviously just random things kind of spread throughout where like when I'm list building, I just can't imagine not running it.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a healthy amount of this stuff kind of scattered around. Obviously, Skaven have quite a bit of it, because they have a lot of this like power pair, or this unit's meant to buff this other unit, has these sort of incidental bonuses they kind of pass around type of thing. Arguably, by the by, something like even the Doom Wheel could fit into this category. Just because it has a weird move out of combat, move over units ability, right? It brings range to the table. Like it is both a range threat. It's very fast, actually, in how it can sort of move around the table and stuff like that. So, it's it responds well to like 3 claw steps ahead, things like that. So, yeah, yeah. Ian Clark says, I use a King Kong model for my Cruel Boys Kronspine. Nice. A lot of votes for sadly some of the units that will be retired from Stormcast, with like the Lord Arcanum on Toralon and stuff like that. But yeah, interesting. Gareth Thomas, of course. How could we forget the man, the myth, the legend, the dog himself? I am the dog. Karnak. Absolutely. Karnak is like becoming a bonus hero away from just being like perfect utility hero. He'll join the Lord Executioner in the Halls of Fame. That's all he needs. That's all he needs. His status as a drop right now is the only thing inhibiting him. But he's there. He's just like he's just champing at the bit, just ready to get in there. He's at the edge of his chain, pulling hard. Yes. So yeah, any other units we want to call out? But I mean, like, I think these utility units are important. And by the way, I think these are often the things that make the difference in winning games, actually, right?
Yeah.
Because they're usually consisting of the tricks or synergies or get out of jail cards or whatever, right? That
Yeah.
allow you to actually pull the sort of things that let you win the game. They have to work in tandem with everything else, right?
Yeah.
But when you have these kinds of utility tricks on your side and the enemy does not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
more or less that's how it's going to shake out, right? Like you're going to come out
Yeah.
ahead there. Your two hammers will out trick their two hammers because of the other silly things you pull or whatever.
Yep.
Right. So. Oh yeah, the Ossifactor guy in OBR that buffs crawlers. Yeah, yeah. No, it's a good call, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that crawler army really has to have that guy. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that. So yeah.
Would you fit the 5 weird dudes from cities in here?
Oh
The
yeah,
command
that's a good
core.
call. Yeah, you're like your baskets of weirdos, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Command
Gobblepalooza. I mean, like
core,
Gobblepalooza is actually
Gobblepalooza.
a wizard, but sure,
Yeah.
they bring
Yep.
other things to the table as well. Yeah, all your baskets of weirdos definitely fit in this category. Okay, so importantly, these 6 categories: you raw utility, making magic, prospectors, porcupines, anvil works, firepower, and higher and hammers. 7. Sorry, 7 units. I apologize. The significant 7, if you will. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The significant 7. You might ask, but Vince, what about the other things you didn't talk about? You didn't mention monsters like at all, or other heroes like foot hero types at all, or chariots at all, or whatever your thing. If your thing, yeah, it's exactly. If your thing was not mentioned here, it's because it's trash. It just doesn't go in lists. Unless you want to play with a fun thing, like, which is fine. I'm not against that. I'm
Which
not
is
telling you you're
terrifying.
doing so.
Like, let's be honest, that is a terrifying development where maybe half the units in the game are not fieldable.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely true right now. Yeah.
That's problematic.
I mean, I don't know that has ever not been the case in the history of AoS. This is just the first time it's been this categorical.
Like, it's been codified. Probably. Now here's a question. How much of this do you think is because of battle tactic design?
Some percentage. Not all, but some percentage. Ian Clark, by the way, said, is Be'lakor in his own category? No, I mean, he's up here in making magic. He would 100% fall into here, right? Because he's like a magical guy who also brings like incredible utility. He's in the Lady O mold, right? Where it's like he's a caster and that's cool, but and he can fight and that's cool.
He's
but
doing other stuff.
That's incidental to his Dark Master ability, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I wonder, like, battle tactics could serve the prospector situation, right? Like, if battle tactics weren't there, you don't need prospectors. Honestly, like,
sure, or if there were other different battle tactics, doing right? Yeah,
yes,
like
yeah.
Imagine a world where I'm not saying this is a good world, but I'm just saying, like, let's imagine a world, okay, where all of the battle tactics are kill or survival related in some way. Okay?
Sure.
I don't think that's actually a better world. I'm just saying, like, let's imagine that.
Right.
Case.
Prospectors become liabilities then.
Yeah, at best they're like chaff. Maybe so, but then you're
giving away points.
Yeah. Sure. Potentially to the end of
like your chaff needs to be anvils. Right? Like, if you're gonna do that, you move to an all anvil meta and an all hammer meta. Everything's anvils and hammers.
Yep. I think that for me, it's like I think there's multiple contributory factors. Monsters are generally too weak. Their defenses are too low. Their wound to point ratio is way off, right? Like, cav units are getting away with murder in this edition. Just murder on their wound to point ratio.
What do you think most monsters should be sitting at wound wise?
I think they're fine. I'd be fine. I don't want to move their wounds up. Like, they're fine. Keep them at those wounds. They just should have generally better defenses. You know, like this is the first time actually in AOS history where universally as a category, the lack of like a toughness stat has reared its ugly head, right? But like they just need to be universally tougher. Like monsters should all have some durability enhancement capability thing significant because you almost always are getting a bad point to or point to model to wound ratio, right?
Yeah.
Way worse than infantry, much worse than cavalry, so
Well,
on.
I'm just thinking like we have Gargants
Poor
who have
defenses
like a
and low damage, and they don't hit hard.
like
That's
a
my other thing. They do not. No monster basically, almost like hero, no non-hero monster. I'm
yeah
speaking about that
yeah
category. Hits as hard as it should. None of them are as scary. No monster in this game, non-hero monster, again, please hear me, right? Hits the equivalent of its what you get out of the same cost of Cav. It's not even close, right? It's just not even in the same
yeah
ballpark.
yeah
Like 10 Black Knights, to be clear.
Yep.
Okay. On the
Sure.
charge are like way more damaging than a 300 point Brood Terror, and they're cheaper.
Yep.
And they have like way more wounds.
Yep. And a ward save. And
a ward
and,
save.
and.
Right?
Yep. Yep. And mortals on the charge. And
yeah, I mean, Ian, a lot of them don't even have 4+ saves. The Brood Terror and the Hell Pit, obviously two closest to my heart, are on like a 5+ save.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird place to be in. Like we are living in a new world.
Right. Yes, 10 Hex Rates are 360 points for 30 wounds, compared to a Gargant that's 450 points for 30 wounds. Which one of those is tougher? Like it's not even close.
No.
Right. So at any rate, you know, that's the challenge we have here is that if it's not in these 7, if it's not in the significant 7, it's a skip.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's more noticeable in this edition, Tom, because it's now become these like wholly defined categories. Monsters always had challenges, to be clear. You know, foot heroes always had challenges, but now there's like that whole thing it's never been so universally crashed to where there's maybe 5 non-hero monsters in the entire game that are like potentially worth considering.
Yeah.
Right.
What are those even? Like as I'm thinking, like the non-hero monsters. That would be.
I went through this
like,
list before and talked through them. They exist.
Maybe the sphere, the mind sphinx.
No, definitely not. No, no. It's appealing on first read, but his strike class doesn't work how you think it works.
Sure.
So like the monsters that just like actual raw monsters, non-hero monsters.
Yep.
God, I've got to go through like everything and think about what is the actual list here. No, it's fine. I had this list. The Leviathan, who's on the screen right now, is one. The big turtle. Yep. I don't think the Ark of Sotek actually falls into it anywhere. Kuhal, I agree. Even in the hero monster category, there's not a ton of them that are real good, but there's a material number. Is the actual regular Spirit of the Wind a monster? If he is, then yes.
I don't think he is.
That's fine. I couldn't remember if he was actually a monster or not, or if they're still infantry. Anyways, if he is, then cool. But the Spirit of the Mountain, the regular.
Yep. Yeah. He's a monster.
The Cow Mountain, not Alarith himself, but the actual just regular Cow Mountain is pretty good. I've got to turn around and look at armies. Probably the regular Stonehorn Beast Riders, only because not because they're actually good, they're bad, but because if you want to play that army, what else are you taking? That's your only choice.
Sure.
So I guess they get used, cause I mean they're bad straight up. All right. Okay. Cool. Spirit of the Wind is a monster. So yeah, him.
Okay.
I don't know. There's probably something else.
The baby giants.
Are the baby giants? Thank you. Yes, baby giants. There you go. In Suns, and aren't the Draken or not Draken the Storm Drake Guard are still monsters, right? In Stormcast.
Yes, they are.
There you go. And they're not a hero. Are big
Cool.
pigs monsters? Yeah, big pigs are monsters, and the
Big
middle
pigs
big
are
pig.
plus.
The middle one is worth it. Yeah, there you go. Big
The
pig.
strike last one.
Yeah, the strike last one. Yeah. So
Yep.
there you go. But like, end of list, right? I think we got there. I think we got to the
24
list I
factions.
made before.
24 factions. And
Yeah,
that's your list.
sure. How many wounds should you have in a 2K list? That's a great question. It varies a lot. Depends on kind of the army that you're running and what your saves are. But I would say if you asked me for just like an Ardent Throne for like an overall average, I think it probably ends up, what, Tom, 100 to 120 wounds probably
Yeah.
in a lot of lists.
Yep.
Now, again,
If I
there's a lot
if
of
I'm
variance on that.
if I'm staring at 140 wounds, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a heavy wound list. Like, again, depends on how elite your army is. What are you paying for the actual ratio? Do you have access to a
Yep.
unit like Clan Rats that's going to, like, pump up your numbers sort of with a Garbo mass? Like, you can get 80 wounds for 600 points in Skaven. Those aren't like high quality wounds, but you can.
Hey, they come back. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure, they're like, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying like they're there. So
Yep.
that's cool. Can these problems be fixed in a patch or two, or are we stuck in this meta for a year plus? I think some of these things could absolutely be fixed. Like the hero problem could get fixed if you just like made a bunch of these heroes bonus heroes, and as you roll to books, actually increase their damage to some degree and or give them some kind of utility. And then boom bang, you're off to the races.
Yeah.
By the way, utility doesn't necessarily have to be buffs for other direct units next to them. There's lots of ways you could get utility out of heroes. That Lord Executioner.
I was going to say the Lord Executioner
is the template example of that, right?
Yes. Yep.
So there you go.
Yep.
I agree. So yeah, I think a lot of these things could be fixed. I don't think we have to be stuck in this world forever. Monsters as they exist now. I mean, you drop like 100 points off of all of them, and some of them are going to be playable, right? They'll still be bad, but at least they'll be like playable. I mean, right now they're just like not even in the zone. They're so far outside the striking distance.
Yep.
But anyways, that's for a future show called The Worst Units in the Game, which we will eventually get to. But these are the best. And so, like,
Yep.
and like, here's the thing. I don't want to make this a downer at the end, even though we talked about those. This is still, like, a lot of good units and things I like to run. In many armies, I've still very much been able to find lists that I enjoy and have fun with. The fact that there's so many of these utility units they're exploring, and by the way, I think this last category we've left up on screen is like one of the things I wish they would explore more. My heart hurts because I am a Timmy, and Timmy loves big, and I'm like the type of Timmy that loves big smashy monsters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I see a Galta Stampede Tyrant, and I'm like,
I'm in. Yeah. You're
Let's
like, I'm
go.
in. Let's do this.
but like that's just cool stuff. But the reality of the thing is that these utility units are really fun. There's quite a lot of them. I hope they explore more of them. And like I've still made plenty of armies I really enjoy running. Skaven's a great example. Yeah. Multiple armies I have fun with and enjoy running. My Slanesh, I like the way I like to play it. My Iron Jaws have been a rough road, but like I've had fun with S2D. I've had a lot of fun with and I don't really run Varangard. I've been playing other stuff and having a good time. I have fun with Doc. I think Daughters is actually a really fun army to play with right now. So like it's not as though I don't want to be doom and gloom on this. Like you can still make pretty varied, interesting armies. I just want to see them bring up these other stuff as well. My poor Timmy heart goes pitter patter for beautiful monster things that go smashy. But that can be fixed over time. So anyways, there you go. Tom, any final thoughts?
No.
All right. Did you want to sling ring out of here or anything? Did you gonna summon a portal to leave? There you go. Good job. Good job. I see what's happening off camera. Um, hey, all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Happy Halloween to all those if you're in a part of the world that celebrates Halloween. I don't know how widespread that is. It's always been a thing for me, so I honestly don't know other cultures and their celebration of Halloween. So yeah. Or maybe All Souls Day if you celebrate that. Maybe you live in like a deeply Catholic country and that's a significant holiday for you. I remember going, that was my life growing up. You get candy, then you go to church all day the next day. But the whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a good one. Thank you to everybody who chatted. Thank you to everybody who had such good stuff. Hit like, hit subscribe, do all that stuff. Thank you to all the super chatters who super chatted and dropped into the Get Tom a Microphone Fund. All of your super chats are going to be going toward getting Tom a microphone so he stops hitting the stupid microphone. That's his Christmas present if we can get there. So thank you all so much for that. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to support the show. Hit like, hit subscribe, click things, make dings, be 10% cooler. Also, don't forget down in the comments below, you can find all the links. So for affiliate links to pick up your hobby stuff, doesn't cost you anything extra, usually saves you money and helps support the channel. Uncle Adam and I's games are down there, so if you want to pick up a new game, check that stuff out. And hey, maybe stay tuned to this social stuff up here, because maybe, just maybe, there's going to be some kind of announcement here pretty soon that might have to do with something. So check that out. And then, of course, there's our Patreon down there. You can check that out, too.
I highly recommend it.
We'll do it when we do the, like, we're not that far away, Left-Handed Dragon, from the S2D book. So when that comes out, we're going to deep dive and do some lists and stuff. So with all of that,